of the more well-known Psalms, Jewish scholars believe that it is David's most powerful because it talks about God's omniscience, his all-knowing, his omnipresence, being everywhere, and his omnipotence, being all-powerful. I've heard others say that it was incredibly meaningful to them, and for a long time there were other passages that were maybe more meaningful to me. That is until I went through my own divorce over the last 2 years, and Psalms 139 found me. So I'd like to share some highlights from my Bible study time during that season. But first, I'm also going to share a poem that I wrote just before being cracked open. And I do mean what felt like a nervous breakdown or spiritual awakening. The poem is called The Pearl, and during this time, oysters have also become quite significant to me. And I hope the way that I share both encourage you. The Pearl. Somewhere in the deep and rushing of the sea, come the waves that break and tear and counter our beliefs. Oh, the wrestle beneath the veil. No matter how we guard our heart, it's not a flaw within our frame, but the design right from the start. It's funny how coming to life can even feel a threat, but it is the twisting and the pressure that is how we beget. We may try to toss the aches and cover them by whirl, but the grit of life surmounted is oft our greatest pearl. Now, for oysters. Oysters have a thin-like veil called a mantle. This organ produces what is called nacre, and that is the substance that creates the shell for the oyster, but it's also the same substance that they put over the grains to create the pearl. In this poem, the veil can represent many things, like the veil of faith, of what you believe, the veil of understanding, maybe the veil of consciousness, the veil of marriage, and more. But when that sand comes in, it irritates the oyster. And I can't help but see the similarities in the way that shame works in our own human lives. How many things in life do we feel shame over? Who we are, who we have been, who we are not, things that we did, things that happened that weren't our fault or even anyone's fault. We can even feel shame over good things like being happy when the world around us is struggling. These things twist in us, and we cover them with good deeds and hard work and neat houses and picture-perfect lives, and all trying to keep it so tight under that shell. We struggle with things on the inside that we don't always understand, that others may not see, but God does. He makes the oyster in such a way that the sand is designed to come in, and he gives the oyster the amazing power to transform it into a pearl. If God can put that much into the design of an oyster, just think of what he can do with each of us, especially when we put all the things aside that we think we have to be, and just go to work on the inside, letting God reveal who and what we were created to be. I may have another pearl reference or two here in the next notes, but I think that this profound experience that led me to the oyster imagery is the same thing that we see here when David writes the Psalm, the 139th Psalm. Let's take a look, shall we? First off, for those of you, I'm going to share these notes line by line in scripture. And I do know that that does frustrate some people because it's really hard to go back and forth. However, that's the way I love to study the Bible. So I encourage you to hit pause and go grab your Bible. And even if you're not a note taker, I encourage you to just pick up a pad and a pen. You don't have to make elaborate notes. Write a timestamp. Email yourself the link if you get interrupted so you can pick it up again. Jot a word down or a verse. And if you don't use it, nothing lost. Anyway, so here we go. This passage is broken down into groups of 6 verses. So there are 4 sections. The first section displays his omniscience, meaning that he knows and sees everything. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. Just like we described on the oyster, he sees our hearts. Others may only see a hard shell, an ego, a status, a well-accessorized outfit, or a black mark, but God sees the truth in our hearts, and he knows who we are. 1 Samuel 16:7. And if you go to BibleHub.com and compare the translations of Genesis 4:1, the word "knew" is used to replace sexual relations when Adam and Eve conceived a child. So there is no deeper way to be known on earth in human form than between a husband and a wife. And the fact that God knows us is also a reflection of how intimately he knows each of us as well. It's not just this guy in the sky in a galaxy far away. And the next verses drive it deeper. Verse 2, you know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You know, when I was a little girl, And actually, when my grandfather retired from the military, he became a security guard at one of the local malls. And when I was a little girl, my grandmother used to take me to go have lunch with him occasionally. Now, I could spot that man what seemed like a mile away. From one end of the mall to the other, it didn't matter how packed it was. I could tell by the shape of his head which way he was walking, forward or backward, and he just had this funky walk, like the way he tried to match his legs and arms. And that could be a sermon all by itself and the way our walk is. But I knew it was him out of a sea of people. Do you know what it's like to really know someone? When they're hangry, how to push their buttons, when they're lying or fronting. When you really love someone, there's this thing called telepathy, and there are countless stories about people who feel each other and share the same thoughts from different parts of the world. And here God says he knows even our thoughts, our feelings, and our mood in the distance. Verse 3, you discern my going and my lying down. You are familiar with all of my ways. He knows how you overcommit and say yes when you mean no, or how you have the best intentions and mean well, and sometimes things just really do not play out the way you thought they would. He knows the way you push people away when you want them close, or the way that you squeeze too tightly because you don't know how to let go. He knows the way that you are so overwhelmed with all the things you could be doing that you don't know how to start just one of them, or the way you feel so responsible for all of it that you just can't find time to rest. Job 31:4 says he counts your every step. Psalms 56:8 says he counts our tears and our tossings. They are recorded in his book. When was the last time that you loved someone so much you wrote down the things that hurt them, or the things that you loved about them or were important to them so that you could memorize them and know them? The New American Standard Translation of this verse says, you scrutinize my path. And that sounds kind of painful. Other synonyms are dissect or inspect. And I believe that it can be uncomfortable to be known that deeply, especially if you already feel a tension around this. This may make sense to no one else but me. But in the span of 2014 to 2016, I was given a pair of pearl earrings that I only wore a few times. I lost one of them and was very disappointed because they were new and I loved them. And so I put the one I had up in my jewelry box. I don't know if it was months or if it was a year, but I know it was definitely a change of seasons when my children found the other one in the dirt lane behind my house. This earring had been rained on, stomped on, snowed on, driven on, and it was in mint condition. Like the hook wasn't bent. It didn't even look like it had dirt stuck in the brackets. And I know that this time span because I Facebooked about it. I was so excited to find my earring. But during that same time, I had also done a study on the life of Abraham. And there were some questions because he is known for being a character that had a tremendous amount of faith in God and just being willing to go wherever he leads, no matter what people think or say about it. And there were a lot of really reflective questions. And somewhere in my answers and some notes that I wrote down, I had made a comment about this earring. Now, it wasn't a huge acknowledgement. It didn't say whether I had lost it or whether I found it. However, those notes were the same notes that I was still stumbling over when I wrote the pearl. And I don't know how to explain it, but that verse came to life, literally in the dirt lane behind my house. That he was with me all along through this struggle, even when I couldn't make sense of it. Verse 4, before a word is on my tongue, Lord, you know it completely. Romans 8:26 through 27 tells me that the Spirit helps me in my weakness and can intercede with God on my behalf. How much more could they help me if I do know what I need to say and he knows me completely? Verse 5, you hem me in before and behind. You lay your hand upon me. When you hem a garment and you do this to preserve a border, to strengthen an edge, to join two pieces. The very word knit or weave, which we will see later in this passage, means to make something stronger because of. And when he says hems me in before and behind, it reminds me of Psalms 34:7. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who what? Fear him. And this is not a wait till your daddy gets home kind of fear. This is a deep love and regard. Fear him. But it's not just a matter of joining and preserving and strengthening. He lays his hand upon us. The hand that took a nail, the hand that soothes a child, the hand that works miracles. Romans 8:28 says, that he can use all things that he puts his hand on together for good, even when you don't even know how to touch it or make sense of it. It's hard to fathom, right? That's why the next verse, in verse 6, says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too lofty to attain. That's trust. When you don't get it and you don't understand it, but you found it to be true, and you finally give in and let go of the reins, and God shows up. Now the second section displays his omnipresence, his being everywhere. Verse 7, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? Jeremiah 23:24 says, where can man hide that I do not see him? Do I not fill the earth and heavens? But if you look at this one verse, there is a spiritual and a physical component, which I do believe is a reference to the Trinity. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? 1 Corinthians 2 talks about the spirit of a man and the spirit of God and how no one understands it and how spirit searches all things. And when I think about spirit life, I am reminded of the verse in John 3:8 that compares it to the wind and about how those who are born of it can feel its direction even though they can't always see where it's going or how to explain it. But in a physical sense, Genesis 32 tells the story of a man named Jacob that wrestled with God to such an extent that he walked with a limp after. Friends, some of our spiritual battles will change us more deeply than any physical experience that we could ever hope to encounter. At the same time, could that thing, be it physical or spiritual, that you are wrestling with, be the very intersection where you are destined to meet God? And maybe by not facing it and diving in, could you be running from him? Verse 8. If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. Romans 8:38 through 39, Paul says, nothing, not heaven, nor earth, nor depth, nor height, nor principalities or other can separate us from the love of God. What about in your sleep or in your bed, like this verse states? Have you ever had God chase you there? A friend of mine once told me that when you can't sleep in the middle of the night, it's because God can't get your attention during the day. In the book of Esther, King Xerxes couldn't sleep and he remembered something that he owed someone. If you wrestle with insomnia, I encourage you to make it a time of reflection, prayer, or just meditation or study time. Just read until you find a nugget or pray. You'll either recognize it or you'll go to sleep. But what about dreams? Do you ever have dreams that recur or cause you tension? And sometimes you are simply startled awake with no details. Other translations of this verse refer to those depths as Sheol, which is another name for hell. So even when you rebel, and even when you are deliberate about the path that is not God, he still pursues you, and he still chases you and wants you, even there. The New Living Translation refers to the depth as the grave. Have you ever just wanted to lay down and die? It's not that you really want to die, but that your pain is so great that the only relief must come through death. Or at least that's the way you feel. Even there, he is with you. From the womb, through life, in death, and after. Verse 9. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea. Not long after I separated, I went on my very first mission trip to the Dominican Republic. And it was the first time that I had ever left home. And while we were there, a lady named Chrissy that did not know anything about me and the significance of pearls or anything like that, she had brought along probiotics because they help you with dietary transitions like these. And they just so happen to be called pearls. And every single day of that trip, she was like, Reggie, along with all the others, it's time for your daily pearl. And I was like, oh my gosh, even here, like... And it's just what we see here in this verse. You know, friends, you can move to the other side of the world. You can travel. You can disappear into a submarine or fly to the moon. But when it comes your time in life that you were supposed to face something, you're not going to be able to outrun it or God when he wants to meet you. And that's why the next verse says, and I wish I had a drum roll, even there, your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. You see this in the life of Jonah when he was running from God's plan, and even the unbelievers were used as they threw him overboard, and a whale came to transport him back to the very place God was taking him all along. You see it in the life of Joseph when His brothers pretended to kill him. He winds up a slave, then thrown into jail, but he's later promoted even there. Neither one of those stories make much sense or hardly seem fair. And the story that you have might be more normal than that. Maybe not. Maybe it's just as weird. But at the same time, don't we talk about a God who makes a way out of no way? You cannot outrun spirit when it is your time, because he is everywhere. Everywhere you've been, everywhere you are now, everywhere you're running to, and everywhere he plans to take you. Psalms 23:3. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Verse 11. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me. In this season of mine, I had gone back to counseling and I almost fell out of my chair when my counselor told me that he wanted me to study Psalms 139 for homework, because this passage was already getting a little too personal for me. He broke down a lot of what I'm sharing with you. And unfortunately, he is no longer practicing. Otherwise, I would broadcast his name across the planet. But in my session, he gave me an example of pilots flying and said that sometimes they risk this period of blacking out and can experience vertigo, especially when they hit turbulence. And he explained how depression is just as black and disorienting. But don't we know that? And then yet, even sometimes when we're in it, we think that we can handle it. But I think that's because we are disoriented. Just like this verse says, even the light becomes night around me. Other times people refer to this darkness as the dark night of the soul. You know, in a podcast by Lisa Tierkhurst called Therapy and Theology, a counselor on there said that due to the way that trauma affects the prefrontal cortex of the brain, you can literally stop learning or being able to process new information until that's resolved. Mastin Kipp is another coach that I listen to, and he speaks a lot about trauma and life purpose. And he defines trauma simply as unprocessed emotions. He says trauma is trauma. It affects us on great levels, no matter how big or minor or major the event was. It doesn't matter the size of it. It impacts us each the same way, and we can just get stuck in that place until we learn to work through it. On that level, I think we've all experienced trauma in some sort of way. On this side of things, have been incredibly surprised at the depth of my own stuckness and denial, trying to do all of the right things and yet being completely paralyzed in other ways, stuck, not knowing how to get myself farther out. But if you cling to that, if you cling to God during that time, he will lead you through, just like he led me to the counselor, to this passage, to the pearl, just as he led Jonah and Joseph and you. And now we're here. And the New American Standard Translation of John 1:9 says, the true light comes to enlighten every man. Verse 12, even the darkness will not be dark to you, and the night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. Enduring Word Commentary says God's constant presence with David was like a constant light in the darkness. As a pillar of cloud illuminated Israel when they were in the wilderness in Exodus 13, so with God's presence, his night shines like the day. Have you ever taken a detour that you didn't know existed? You know, quite a few years ago, there was a really bad accident here in Gloucester, and I remember I was on my way home, and I called my husband at the time, and I was stuck, and I was like, I have no idea when I will be home. And he asked me where I was, and I told him, and he's like, well, you can turn right there, and it cuts over to this road, and then you hit this road, and then it bypasses all of that, and you'll still be home in just a few minutes. I was like, how have I lived here most of my life? And I had no idea that those roads intersected. But 2 Corinthians tells us that we live by faith, not by sight. Sometimes our emotions, our trauma, or what we think we already know will cloud our view and hinder our progression. And sometimes the world around us is a dark and scary place. And that's why you need to let him be your guide. The directions won't always make sense, but that's because I believe he sees the path ahead. Our faith is an internal GPS that you grow just like any other muscle by spending time in the Word and prayer and the practice of using it. Third section. We're almost there, guys. Thank you for hanging in. This is the third section, and it's the last two, I think, really reflect his omnipotence, which means his all-powerfulness. Verse 13, for you created me in my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. When you think about being knit together, man, that's a process. Every loop is intentional. There's a pattern, a plan, a design woven into every single one of us. My commentary says that God's character goes into the creation of every single person. And when you feel worthless or even being like you hate yourself, remember that God's Spirit is already willing to go to work inside of you, and that you should have as much self-respect for ourselves as our Maker has for each of us. Psalms 119:73 says, "You formed me and fashioned me. Give me understanding of your decrees." But if we ever ask him to do that, give us understanding of his word, or to restore our dignity, or to heal our unbelief, or to give us a love for his word, or a passion for prayer, or a comprehension of worship. Ephesians 3 tells us that he can do exceedingly abundantly more than we could ever hope or ask for. I beg you to ask and just pray those prayers right there. Verse 14, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." Can we just talk about redemption here in this verse? Talk about healing dignity and unbelief in the first 13 verses before this, working the yucky stuff out and getting to this place where you can make this kind of acknowledgement. If you're not in a place where you have this changed view about God and who he created you to be and his wonder-working power in your life, have you even experienced the gospel? You have been running from God. You have been chased by God. You have tried everything under the sun to ease your pain with vices, counseling, work, changing routines. But in the end, it is God and only God that can heal it. Not just numb it, but actually pull it out and touch it so that it doesn't sting anymore. And then he shows you his grace and how much he loves you and has always loved you and found you worthy, and shows you how he plans to use all that you have gone through. And you realize that facing those demons aren't going to hurt you as much as holding on to them did. You see yourself, good and bad, like God does, and you are his work and you are wonderfully made. He gives you a purpose for it. Like it says in Isaiah 61:3, beauty for ashes, not beauty and ashes, as Joyce Meyer points out. He gives you one thing in trade for something else, which means you have to let go and give it to him. That word fearfully does not say full of fear. What a beautiful and wonderful creature that can take the grit of life and things that tear you up on the inside and produce them to something beautiful and highly valued by others. What a gift that God would give each of us the same power. It is the same substance that is used in making the shell and the pearl, but not all oysters make pearls or jewels, and not everyone will go to work on the inside. It is easier to build that strong exterior and not need anything, right? But the Bible tells us the kingdom is within. But if God could show you how to transform it, what a creator to be revered and to behold. The revelation of God in you. The King James Dictionary says fearfully, in a manner to impress, admiration, or astonishment. And astonish means impressive or surprising. My counselor said, so awesome it is scary. Maybe that alone is his purpose for you, to make, with his help, new creations out of your past and pain. We live in an instant age. The research suggests that our attention span is like 8 seconds. It might take more than one church service, one book of the Bible, or that one time you prayed, and you may really need to meditate on it for a little while. An oyster, depending on whether it's freshwater or salt, can take 1 to 20 years to make a pearl. And I am telling you about things that have been stitched together over years to get me from there to now. An oyster labors over that grain and does something with it. Are you? Verse 15, my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Do you ever see something and it just gets stuck and you can't proceed until you get that question answered? That happens to me a little bit in this section of the psalm because God knit us together in our mother's womb, but in the earth at the same time. Well, science tells us that a woman already has eggs of her future children within her when she's born. And Louis Giglio points out that if you unravel your DNA and tried to read the 3 billion characters in it, it would take you 96 years to complete. Talk about unique and complex. No wonder you don't understand yourself. How could you? Genesis 2:7 says, the God that formed Adam from the dust of the ground. So you and I were put in the DNA of Adam and Eve from the very beginning. And if God continues to perfect us like it says in Philippians 1:6, then who's to say that on a spiritual realm, his hands aren't inside each of us, knitting us inside our mothers as we develop? It's like that line in my poem, it was not a flaw within our frame. He made us that way. He formed it from the beginning with his hands. I am not the most educated person, and so I hesitate to say this next part, but I hope you hear what I mean. It is almost like we need our humanness, whether that's the sin, defect, hurt, whatever you call it, because without seeing some variation of our brokenness and how we can't help ourselves, we aren't able to see his omnipotence and how powerful he really is. I didn't paint before my divorce. It could have been there all along. I didn't look inside. Maybe God gave it to me to help me work out something that I couldn't see that was stuck on the inside. But it wasn't until I could come to him, and this is the scary part, folks. I had a relationship with God before this moment. Thankfully, God doesn't come just for the sinners. He comes for those who believe too. After all of my years sitting in church, even leading classes, praying and fasting, it wasn't till I could say, here, God, I don't know how to do this anymore. And I'm not talking about marriage. I'm talking about being me. I tried to do all of the right things and wound up a mess of myself and didn't even know how I got there. How could I possibly contribute to anyone else if I was confused about what I was offering? And all I could say at that moment when it broke was, here, God, I need you to take this because all of the ways that I am trying to heal myself are killing me. And I need you to do this. And then I sat in solitude. And during this time, friends, I learned that I struggled with something called codependency. Maybe you're familiar with that term. I'd heard it before, and I'd actually come a long way by the time I found this term, but the first time I ever heard it, I slightly balked at it because it sounded so needy. I never really dug deeper until I found myself broken. You want to talk about a damaging addiction? Look it up. And Melody Beattie has some great books and resources and a really extensive list, and I'll link to it in the notes. We can be so invested in what's going on the outside of us that we are completely out of touch with what is on the inside of us. I literally could not separate myself from other people in some ways, especially those that I was closest to. And it is taking me 2 years of practically being in solitude to learn where I end and others begin. Job 10:11 says, you clothed me with skin and flesh and knit me together with bones and sinews, which are your ligaments. Just as it is God who knits and puts things together, Hebrews 4:12-13 says, the very word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword, and it penetrates, dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrow. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. Nothing in all of creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of whom we must give an account. There is nothing that passes through our frame that he did not know about, allow to be there, or cannot use. Sometimes it takes destruction, like ripping the shell off an oyster, not just to reveal what's on the inside, but to return us to that soft, tender flesh and to the heart of who we are. Just imagine how different the world could be if we all returned to that place. Verse 16, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained before me were written in your book before one of them ever came to be. I want you to close your eyes and just imagine for a minute God writing the list of his plans of how he plans to create the earth. And on that list, he says, this one. She'll have an abortion, but I'll create her anyway. And this one got a divorce. And this one struggles with that addiction. And this one lost everything to that other habit. And God bless this one's heart. This one just can't stay out of trouble. And yet, he loves us all. And he can't wait to make each one. They are written in the book before we are created. Why are we so afraid of God when he's already got a hold of it? Or us? And why do we resist what we think he might ask us to do, self included, when he made us in a fearfully and wonderful way to respond? Verse 17, how precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. When you understand redemption, when you see God's power in your life and experience his healing, it does make you marvel over him and his mysteries. Verse 18, were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I am awake, I am still with you. At first, I am comforted by this verse. When you go through all of this and you realize, yes, I am awake and I am still with you, that he never leaves and forsakes us, man, that is rest. But I mean, really, is there anything else to say here? It says grains. They would outnumber the grains of sand. Are his mysteries and revelations in your life too numerous for you to count? Or do you hear messages like this and think that the speakers are a little too woo-woo or too literal or too corny? I'm not saying this in a self-deprecating manner, friend. I have been there. Sometimes sometimes new and different concepts are weird, and church is no different. And we let our tiniest and seemingly most innocent judgments keep us from some of the biggest victories of our life. I was saved at 16, baptized at 21, and probably started a real relationship with God somewhere in my late 20s or 30s, early 30s. There were revelations after revelations of all shapes and sizes. This just happens to be the biggest so far. But this verse, when it says, when I am awake, I am still with you. Well, duh, we just took 18 verses to cover that. I don't know, it struck me a little bit different. When you get a moment in your spare time, go look up the signs and symptoms of a spiritual awakening. They are not pretty. And when that shell comes off and maybe we open it on our own, it could be ripped, it could be brutal, it could be broken. We are not just aware of our hurt. We are suddenly aware of all the things we didn't know and the things we couldn't control and the pain that we've caused others as a result of our not knowing. Our whole belief system, even the parts around God, whether you believe in him or not, get pulled apart with it. And you can even find yourself doubting God or angry at God or completely just perplexed about everything you ever thought you knew. And I am dumbfounded that I, as a believer, and knew I was a sinner and knew God and could not see how asleep I was, like that autopilot in doing. But divorce is also messy. Tragedy is. Life stops and we forget how to do things that we used to do really well, and we take 20 leaps backward and feel like we can't keep anything together once that shell comes off and we're awake. But when you finally awaken and you discover your mess, you can see that he is still with you. He is still with you. Last section. And this last section is such a twist, I almost left it out. I had to look up a lot of commentary through all of Psalms 139, and really, to much of my surprise, I was surprised I couldn't find as much of the historical facts as I usually do and like to. I don't really want to be full of Reggie in all of these messages. But the Blue Letter Commentary, Bible commentary, says that David's referencing sinners in general, not just a specific group here. It takes a dramatic twist if you're not familiar with this passage. But I'm going to use it to talk about how once we get to that place, once we work through this junk and we awaken and we have to start making life changes, I'm going to use it to talk about how the world around us responds to that change. Please feel free to give me lessons or timelines and links below. I do want to grow too. But verse 19 says, if only you, God, could slay the wicked away from me, you who are bloodthirsty. Quite a surprise, right? Well, first, yes, even mighty God-fearing, believing people have evil and bitterness and judgment within them. We wrestle with the same emotions, but like David, we can give every single one of them to God. We don't have to compartmentalize or dumb down how we feel. He already knows. Second, we know that the same David that defeated Goliath was a good shepherd and a powerful king. But we also know that he was a sinner. He had an affair with Bathsheba. And he later killed her husband, trying to cover up the fact that he got her pregnant while she was married. Some people may never let you live down the terrible way you handle things or your imperfections. Some people may not support your growth when you need to get healthier, especially if that means that it separates you from them, because it hurts them too. Sometimes in their painful response, they hurt you back, whether or not either one of you ever mean to do that. Again, our humanness continues. So let's remember that verse about how he continues to perfect each of us. Verse 20, they speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. So let's put this in a different perspective so that it's not about you or I. You can look at the recent conversion of Kanye West. Who knows if it's from a sincere place, and it's not for you or I to say whether or not he has been saved or changed. But the mockers have come out of the woodwork, and even Christians seem to have a field day with it, as if the God who does miracles and changes whomever he pleases really can't do all that we say he can. That's like blasphemy right there. But who cares? Let's just celebrate God's goodness and victory every way we can in life and leave it to God to shake out what is or is not genuine. And when you start putting down boundaries for the first time, if you've never really done it, you might be overly defensive about it and sound like you're biting people's heads off, and people will comment that you're getting too big for your britches. And when you do want to get clean and sober finally, which means you also have to stay in on some Friday nights and do things differently, some people are going to think that it's about them and instead of you trying to be well. And they're going to be offended and take it personal. And when you do start walking in confidence, people are going to think you're arrogant or stuck on yourself. But God says, go boldly, sister or brother. So you go ahead and keep marching on anyway. And if you talk about God and how he's changing your life, it makes people squirm and some people will mock it. Change in you is going to affect things around you. And most everyone else is stuck too, so you can't let what they say hold you back. Verse 21, do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? But when you have an encounter with God, no matter what scale, it does change you. And hate is a really strong word here. But if you consider it against people who merely disagree with your beliefs. But look around us. The world is full of hate for each other, even for the tiniest of discrepancies in beliefs. How much stronger is it when we are passionate about our cause and our justifications? It's no different than when people who rescue animals hate the way other people treat animals, even if it's not bad. It's just not glorious. It's no different than the political views or the stuff over the color of our skin. Our passion and our judgments get the best of us and really get us in a funk or trouble if we let it. Verse 22, I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them as my enemies. But at the same time, when you experience God in a way that David has through the first 18 verses, it can frustrate you to be around those who have no regard for him. If we have a God that can give us sight ahead, in the distance, in our own soul, and can heal us and join us together individually and as a people, God forbid any man or woman that would want to be against that, and those who only want to divide and look for problems. Verse 23, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Other translations say, examine me. What a powerful statement that is. As adults, we can be afraid of going to the dentist, afraid of needles, afraid of being examined by a doctor because of what they might find or because it might hurt. Our minds can run wild with the possibilities. Let alone God, a God who judges and is full of fire and brimstone, a God who demands a changed life and places a call on it, a God who punishes and was just identified as being a vindicator, especially when others need God to vindicate you or them on your behalf. No wonder we get afraid sometimes. But when you know what God can do, when he has healed you, when he has touched you, when he has reconciled you as he promises he will, you are unafraid with God, arms outstretched, when he makes it feel better, asking him to examine you again. What do you see in me, God? And because we've passed that point of uncomfortable now, I'm sure you'll appreciate this humor. Pastor David from Palisades Lutheran Church said the Hebrew text of the word search means to investigate or dig. And he said you could literally take this text to say, you dig me, God. But he does. And imagine again how much better our world would be if we all let God do the digging in ourselves, removing our planks instead of being distracted by what everyone else had going on. Boy, doesn't the devil have some deceptive tactics. Verse 24, see if there is any offensive way in me and lead me to the everlasting. Job 31:6 says, weigh me with honest scales and know my integrity. Now that's a word I thought that I knew and lived out pretty well, but if you say that your family is first, do they really come before work or a clean house or service to everyone else, your ministry, your hobby, your side business? If you say that you're an honest person, can you even talk about your transgressions, or just the things that look good? If you say that you live by certain values, does that only apply when no one pushes back? Or do you bend your standards to make others comfortable and to people please? And I'm talking about even when it comes down to your spouse or disciplining your kids or helping people in your community and at church. Does your yes mean yes and your no mean no? Do your answers really stand for or match your convictions? Boundaries, preserving the most basic belief system at the core. James 1:8 says that a double-minded person is unstable in all of their ways. If there is any offensive way in me, God, and lead me to the everlasting. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, if you can give up the junk that you've been trying to figure out and just trust him, he will make your path straight. Now I'm closing. I will never tire of telling people to journal your verses, your prayers, what you don't even know how to write. And there are statistics that talk about the power of journaling, but that talk about the power of actually writing. You can say that the Bible is man-made or that there's stories about other people. Aside from it being the inspired word of God, it is also page after page of people who have had encounters with him. Every sinner you read about in the book was able to see him. And we're inspired by the way that God moved in David's life because David wrote about it, going through it and after. And me, some of the things that I put together, if I didn't write the poem about the pearl and didn't go back and read notes from journal entries and didn't study on my own, there are things that I would not have been able to put together either. When you sit down to have an encounter with God, and I do pray this over all of you, that you will take the time maybe in 2020, which I think means perfect vision, that you will take the time to just get a notebook and maybe start writing. You can call it letters to God. You can just write your prayers down. You can take notes you've scribbled from this video if you've done any, and just start figuring out what you question there and write down what your answers are and maybe mark at it later. And I pray that no matter what that first page says or where you start, I pray that you go into it with the attitude that says, because I'm starting this, God, I believe that you're going to meet me here. Give me the desire and the will and the hunger to keep coming back until I see it for myself. Sometimes the correlations and the things that you're tracking, the unexplainable that you find in your own notes, becomes all the evidence that you need. Let's close in prayer. Father God, I don't know who watches this video. I don't know what anybody who is watching this video is going through in this life. But I know that your word says that in 2 Corinthians 3:16, that whoever comes to you, you lift that veil. And it may happen 1,000 times, but that you want to reveal us the same way that I believe we want to know you, and that we want to have security and healing in our own life. I pray that 2020 is a miracle year for everybody, but particularly those who seek you. And I pray that you show up and blow their mind in ways like Jonah or others that we have seen. And I pray you give them a love for your word and a closeness to your spirit and discernment that they can't explain, and transitions in their life that they can't explain other than your hand being on it. I thank you for all your many blessings, God, and love you for everything you do, even when we don't understand. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Happy New Year, people. I love you so much.